as needed. Excuse yourself. Take a break if you need to. Make sure you have somebody that you can talk to if you need to. And just remember to take care of yourself during these really difficult times that we're going through. So to start off the evening, we're going to lead you all in a chant. So this is pretty simple here. We'll say something and you guys repeat it back, okay?
Woo!
We're going to lead with thoughts and prayers are not enough.
Thoughts and prayers are
not enough. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Thoughts and prayers are not enough. Thoughts and prayers. Woo!
So for tonight, our first speaker is Father Bernie. And Father Bernie attended a rally similar to this a few years ago at the courthouse square. This proved to be the launching point of his involvement with Voice of Westmoreland. Father Bernie is a priest of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Greensburg with assignments at Central Catholic High School, Ascension Church, Jeanette, and St. Regis Stratford, and chaplain for Clelian Heights School off of Route 66 near Delmont. Currently, he is a member of the Association of U.S. Catholic Priests and serving on its Gospel Nonviolence Working Group that reminds people that Jesus told Peter to put away his sword. Today, Jesus would say, best not to walk around armed if you want to be one of my disciples. Welcome, Father Bernie.
Woo!
Thank you, and good evening to everybody. I've already been walking around asking people, I'm looking for Catholics. And some people say, thank you, what's that? Well, you're looking at one. I was 2 weeks old when my parents took me to church to be baptized. That was 82 years ago. But anyways, yes, in the introduction, 4 years ago I was down at the courthouse and heard a wonderful student from Hempfield High School speak. I also heard a wonderful student from Greensburg-Salem High School speak. I heard a young man from New Kensington speak. And that was the beginning, I believe, of Voice of Westmoreland. Well, you would think that would have impressed a lot of people, but months later I called up Hempfield High School administration and asked to talk to somebody there who knew that student who talked at the rally at the courthouse. They said, we don't know what you're talking about. I called up Greensburg-Salem with the same question. I'd like to meet that student. We don't know what you're talking about. Well, don't feel bad if you went to Hempfield or to Greensburg-Salem, because most people don't know what was being said then. And that's why I'm here tonight. I'm asking you to remind the something like 10,000 people who go to Catholic Church on a typical weekend here in Westmoreland County. I go 47 churches, right? Around 10,000. That's about 12% of all the registered voters in this county. And to help you do that, I have a flyer here. Now, you don't have to be a Catholic to do this, but I'm looking for a working group of maybe 4 or 5 people who are going to work with me and me with them to get this out to those 10,000 people. After, on the sheet is, and everyone get one, after a quote from Pope Francis, his remarks before the U.S. Congress back in September of 2015, this sheet reads, the House of the U.S. Congress voted Wednesday, June 8, 2022, by a 223 to 2004 vote to pass a wide-ranging package of gun control legislation called Protecting Our Kids Act. U.S. Representative Guy Reschenthaler voted no.
Woo!
No. And so the petition, I'm reading, A petition by residents of the 14th Congressional District reads this way, quote, Congressman Guy Reschenthaler, we, the undersigned, petition you to publicly repent your no vote to the Protecting Our Kids Act of June 2022. And
Yes.
promise to support any future federal legislation designed to rein in gun violence. Name, address, city, state, zip, phone number, optional. We've got to get as many of you who will do this tonight, and those who want to work with me, make sure that you take one and get in touch with me with your contact information. And it concludes with this way. The list of signers will be delivered to the Greensburg office of Representative Reschenthaler before July 4th, 2022. The petition with the name and city only of the signers will be posted on the internet by July 4th, 2022. All people of goodwill are invited to participate in this campaign. In italics, citizens residing in the 13th Congressional District, that's out east, you know, are encouraged to organize a similar campaign with their Congressman John Jones. The campaign is sponsored by Pax Christi Greensburg, a Pax Christi USA affiliate. There's the website, and there's the address, post office box, email, and phone number. Any questions? Feel free. Any questions? Well, be sure you get one of these yellow sheets from me, and let's see if we get a working group working on it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Woo!
Test. Can you guys hear me?
Way
Is that
better. Yay!
Thank you so much. Okay. Oh, thank you, Father Bernie. I am going to lead you all in another chant here while Sarah goes ahead and sets up some signs for our next speaker. So we are going to combine two for this one. And we are going to do Never Forget and Never Again. Ready?
Yes!
Never forget.
Never again! Never again! Never again! Never again! Again! Never again! Never.
Never again.
Never again! Never again!
Never again.
Woo!
Never again. There we go. Thank you guys. Facing the audience. That'll work. And for our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Tanya Williamson. Tanya is a mother from Jeanette who tragically lost her son, Mariel, to gun violence in the fall of 2019. Since that tragic event, Miss Tanya has worked tirelessly to get justice for her son. Welcome, Mrs. Tanya.
Woo!
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanya Williamson. I am the mother of this beautiful angel, Mariel McGowan.
Just in case she needs me.
Mariel had a big smile that could light up a room, wrote music, was a family guy with 3 children. I'm here tonight because on October 28th, 2019, my son was shot and killed. Mariel was shot by a gun not registered to the shooter, but his shooter was never charged. He was not charged for the unregistered gun or the murder of my son. None of the men with guns at the scene were ever charged and are blaming my son for his own death. As a matter of fact, in my meeting with the district attorney, Chuck E. Walborn, looked me right in my eyes and said they may or may not charge the shooter. As of today, they only brought charges against the men that hid the guns. As of today, my son's killer walks free. The district attorney met with me on April 22nd, 3 years after my son's murder, to tell me they would not be taking any further actions as my son's death was justified under the Castle Doctrine. They stated this was their way of giving me clarity. My son was shot in the street. He was not on the sidewalk. He was not on someone's property. My son was unarmed and he was on public street. We allow the underaged, mental unwell, and even previous offenders to find and use guns right here in our community. How will we ever feel safe? Let's hold our elected officials accountable. Enough is enough.
Hallelujah.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mrs. Tanya. And next we have Aaron. Is it Michael? I hope I said that right. Okay. Aaron is the co-owner of Practice Makes Perfect Music Studio, as well as the piano, voice, and organ teacher. He is originally from Latrobe and grew up in the area. Aaron currently resides in Greensburg with his wife, Julia, and daughter, Cadence. Welcome, Aaron.
Hi, everybody. I am apparently the sound guy for tonight. I got volunteered. So I'm sorry for all the feedback and crazy noises that happened tonight.
So the word is volunteered.
Anyway, I'm very, well, not happy to be here, but I'm glad that I am here. When I was asked to speak, I said yes pretty much immediately, because this is just ridiculous at this point. I'm 31 years old now. Columbine happened 23 years ago. 23 years ago, I was still in school for Columbine. And it's still happening today. This is just absolutely ridiculous that I have to be afraid to be in school, and now my kids have to be afraid to be in school. This year, last year, and 2020, guns were the leading cause of death in children and adolescents. Surpassed automobile accidents by 80%. It was insane. That's crazy to me that guns are the leading cause of death in the US for children and adolescents and nowhere else in the world. It's the only place. So most of my friends, my wife, almost all of my staff at work are school teachers. I'm terrified for them every day. I have to look at my wife every morning and wonder if she's going to come home. Like, it's terrifying. I have a daughter. I wonder every day if my wife is going to get to come home to see my daughter. Is my daughter going to get to say mama at 4 o'clock today on a Friday? Or am I going to get a terrifying phone call at 6 o'clock that night? My best friends all have kids that are getting ready to go to school. 4 of them texted me this week and said, we're homeschooling. They're not even close enough to consider that this year, but they're so afraid that they've already decided that they're not sending their kids to school. These are 2-year-old, 3-year-old kids, and they're not going to get an education at a public school because they're afraid they might die. My wife's best friend is a teacher in the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. My wife is a deaf ed teacher. They both teach kids that are deaf and hard of hearing. Those kids will never hear the gunshot go off at school. They won't hear the warning. They won't hear the teachers yelling for them to get into the building. My wife's best friend teaches at a school, and she doesn't even have a room. She's in the hallway. What happens if a shooter gets into that school? All of her students are dead. She's dead. There's nothing they can do about that. And they want these teachers to be armed.
Boom!
doesn't have time to come home and play with their daughter during the week? When is she supposed to be trained on how to use a firearm properly? How are we going to protect the kids who get into the desk or the gun cabinet at school and now they have a weapon? It's not going to work. I can't believe that I have to even be here speaking about this right now. I never, in 31 years, did I think I'd have to come out and say, hey, we shouldn't shoot our kids. It's insane. It's just not right. Kids are afraid to go to school. I'm afraid to send my kids to school. My friends are afraid to go to school. Teachers are afraid to go to school. I've never once been afraid to go to work. I've never been once afraid that someone's going to break into my home and I'm not going to be able to protect myself. In 31 years, that's never happened, but there have been countless school shootings, countless shootings everywhere. I have been afraid to go to school. I have been afraid to be hanging out with a group of friends. One of them gets drunk and decides to go play with their guns outside. I have been afraid to go to a friend's house whose dad might have been a little unhinged and they have a whole gun cabinet. Those things do terrify me. In college, one of my buddies went for spring break and he did not come home because they decided to play with a gun. That was it. That's the only reason I don't get to see him anymore. I don't get to text him ever again. Excuse me. I cannot believe that we allow AR-15s to be purchased when police officers are afraid to confront the people that are holding that gun.
Yes!
And they're the same people that expect you, me, you, my wife's friend, my friends, to carry a gun and confront that person with a pistol. Somebody explain how that makes any sense.
It doesn't.
I'm gonna wrap up because I could go on forever, but the last thing I want to say is just that this is completely preventable. There is no reason for any of this. It is 100% preventable, and we are just choosing not to. My heart goes out to all the parents, the victims, the teachers, students, people that just want to go to the grocery store. It is terrible, and I can't believe that any of this is happening. I am so sorry to all of the parents and teachers and students and anyone affected by gun violence, and I hope this speech helps change some hearts. That's all I hope that this happens. Anyway, I am done. I'm wrapped up, but we have Kate Kell is our intern at Practice Makes Perfect Music Studio. She's a fantastic vocalist, guitarist, and keyboard player, and she's also one of our student teachers. So she's going to come up. She's performing Imagine by John Lennon.
Courtney. Courtney.
Can't they just leave that up there?
Yeah. The lyrics are on the paper that everybody was given when they came in.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
I just thought it would be respectful to leave it there.
Well, we had them in the back, so I think
The
we should
lyrics
put
for
them
this
back up
song
when we
can
go
be
back up.
found on your papers if you got one.
I didn't get Good job.
We needed more papers.
I know all these. I printed 30.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, that's what we said.
That was Sarah.
Yes, that is what we said. Sarah said 25 and you said 30.
That wasn't for those. That was for something else.
Test. Sorry. Like I said, makeshift sound guy.
You're doing great.
I'll fix this after we're done with this song.
I was just talking about the post. No, in our agenda yesterday, I wrote down 30 for the. I didn't see that.
Mm-hmm. If you try, below us, of us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Trees, it's hard to do. Or die for religion too. Imagine all the people living for peace. You say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine all possessions. I wonder if you can. No need or hunger, a brotherhood of men. Imagine all the people. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Someday you'll join us, and the world is one. Woo!
Thank you.
Testing.
Got it.
All right, thank you so much, Aaron and Kate. What a beautiful song.
Woo!
Such a beautiful song. And next we have Justin Blantley. He is a community activist, co-lead of the Westmoreland Racial and Social Justice, and a member of Voice of Westmoreland. He has been organizing and taking action for change in our local community for several years. Justin is here today as a concerned citizen and spoke at the March Pittsburgh earlier today. Welcome, Justin.
Woo!
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah!
Absolutely.
Hello, my name's Justin Blatney, and I'm with Westmoreland Racial and Social Justice, a gathering of activists that acts as an outlet for people in our area to feel empowered, to speak up, and find unity in each other through various issues that we believe should be treated as basic human rights. First, I want to thank all of you for supporting the Rally Against Gun Violence movement today and every day as this fight continues. This movement is in response to more than just any one underlying issue. We may fantasize that our problems are so easily solved by such action as banning weapons of war like assault rifles, which we should do, but unfortunately the underlying problem is systematic. To say guns are the whole issue would be disrespecting the more than 20 victims of the 2014 knife attack at nearby Franklin Regional High School. or the roughly 100 incidents of cars running into protesters who were responding to the murder of George Floyd. Banning assault rifles, improving background checks, requiring training and tests to own guns are all a great way to start the discussion, but it must be treated as only just the beginning. We must continue to push back on the organizations and narratives that redirect us from the underlying answers. Obviously, the NRA must be held accountable for their obstruction of actual progress and justice.
Woo!
Thank you. But we can't stop there. The NRA are no longer the be-all, end-all, as there are now competing groups threatening to take the gun culture and violent rhetoric to new extremes. Additionally, the Supreme Court is looking to further relax gun laws, and many politicians who are supposed to be fighting for us aren't clear enough with their messaging, as they fear rocking their party's boat too much. We need to demand our politicians be clear with their message, stern with their words, and consistent with their actions to hold them accountable.
Yes!
They answer to us.
Yes!
They answer to us. We need politicians who aren't afraid to upset traditionalists as they seek accountability no matter where injustice may lie. We need leaders who acknowledge all mass shootings, even if it's deemed gang-related. When the police's story changes too many times, we need leaders who call for the FBI to investigate the police department. Prior to the DOJ announcing their intervention in Uvalde, Texas earlier this week, how many officials were actually calling for this beforehand? When the solution is more police funding, where are the leaders who suggest competence and reform instead? Money doesn't buy courage, especially in a town like Uvalde, which spends 40% of its budget on policing. This is the beginning of a long fight. We need leaders who will fight for voting rights even after their election, because addressing gun violence won't be solved with one or two bills. The House of Representatives passed a bill this week raising the age limit of purchasing a semi-automatic rifle from 18 to 21. But the rational part of the human brain isn't even done developing until age 25.
Yes!
Thank you. Furthermore, this bill passed through the House bloated with other stipulations that are guaranteed to break off any support that it may have had in Congress. These bills need to be voted on individually for any chance at success. Looking at long-term goals, we must not allow the narrative to take hold that public schools aren't worth saving or funding because they are unsafe. We already see public outrage and censorship being pushed on schools, but we must ensure that the future generations continue to receive a full education in hopes of improving the system one day. If we allow fear and ignorance to raise another generation, we will unfortunately see more violence. Additionally, leaders must acknowledge the absurdity of the biased and illegitimate Supreme Court that will overturn any change Congress may make, no matter how little or symbolic it may be at most. Many of our leaders won't even entertain the notion of expanding the courts, so the battle for systematic change could possibly take decades. There are so many issues that we each perceive as needing prioritized, but perhaps if we find common ground, we can reach solutions faster. That's why we need unity. Not unity with the people upholding the status quo that led us into this mess, but unity within communities. When right-wing fascism falsely blames the LGBTQ+ community for the Uvalde school shooting, recognize that we all suffer. When the media pushes mental illness as the cause of mass shootings, ask why don't other countries have the same violence we have? Also ask why don't we have free health care to help manage such illness?
Yes!
That mental health stigma hurts us all and our families. When people are pushed to the breaking point from unjust economic hardships, ask if we could have afforded more relief instead of more grief. When they point to a city or town that has enacted gun legislations but still has gun violence, point back at the surrounding towns that have not enacted such bans. As we saw in Buffalo, this violence isn't limited to any one region or community. The hate and blame will travel, and that's why we need to reach out to our neighbors to build an alliance, neighbors in both distance and identity. Thank you, and stop the violence.
Woo!
Thank you so so much, Justin. Okay, guys, we're going to do another chant together. We're going to do "The people united will not be defeated."
The people
United will not be divided. The people united will not be defeated. The people united will not be defeated. People united will not be defeated. The people united will not be defeated. The people united will not be defeated. The people united will not be defeated. People united will not be defeated. Woo!
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Marty Haken. Dr. Haken is a neurology specialist in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and has over 21 years of experience in the medical field. Dr. Haken has extensive experience in epilepsy, neurodegenerative disorders, and headaches. She graduated from Georgia Regents University Medical College in 2001 and works at both Westmoreland and Latrobe hospitals. Dr. Marty is a longtime member of Voice of Westmoreland, a talented artist and gallery owner in town, and she is the parent of 2 school-aged children.
Thank you. I'm old school. I have pieces of paper to look at. So I'm going to sit down.
Great. Make yourself comfortable.
When I was in, just after I graduated from high school.
Microphone.
When I graduated from
There
high
we
school,
go.
someone in my class shot himself to death not long after I graduated. I was looking at this topic and I found some really interesting statistics from the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Studies. 2020, which is the last record for which year for which the full data is available, 2020 had the highest gun deaths on record with a 15% increase over 2019, and there were 45,222 gun deaths. That's in 2020. That's equivalent to everyone in Greensburg, plus Latrobe, plus Murraysville. In 2020, there were 124 gun deaths daily. That's equivalent to everyone here right now. Of the 45,000 gun deaths, 24,000 were suicides, and about 19,000 were homicides. And as Justin mentioned, gun violence is now the leading cause of children and adolescents in this country. It's especially bad for black children. 52% of deaths among black children and adolescents in 2020 were from guns. It's especially bad for males. Boys and men are 5 times more likely to die from gun homicide and 7 times more likely to die from gun suicide than females. And it's especially bad in rural populations where suicide by gun is 2.1 times more likely than in urban populations. In Pennsylvania, we had 1,752 gun deaths, including 169 children in 2020. Many people say, well, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Well, that's true. You know, you need somebody to pull the trigger. However, guns are an attractive method for killing people because they're very accessible and they're very effective. Guns are used in homicides 9 times more than the next most common method of killing people, which is stabbing. 9 times. In 2020, 53% of suicides were by firearms. 90% of suicide attempts by firearms are fatal, but only 5% of overdoses and cuttings are fatal. So what can be done? You know, we have this big divide of, well, either somebody wants to take away all the guns or we do nothing. Well, there is common ground, and I really strongly believe we got to find that. One of is community violence interventions. They have studied at the National Institute of Justice what are the risk factors for mass shooters. Most of them have experienced some kind of childhood trauma, violence, parental suicide, physical and sexual abuse. Most mass shooters study the actions of others. And that's one thing that we all can do, is don't say the names of the shooters. There is a website of nonotoriety.com, which I invite everybody to look at, to just have a media blackout and try not to spread information that other would-be shooters can study. And most mass shooters have a means to carry out their plan. And that's something that we can interrupt. Firearm purchaser licensing laws are supported by 75% of adults, including 60% of gun owners. And then there are extreme risk protection orders and domestic violence protection orders. We know that these help because the 5 states with the lowest gun rates all have waiting periods, and they all have extreme risk protection orders. Can anybody guess what the lowest lowest rate of gun violence, which state it is? Anybody have a guess? Hawaii. Hawaii has 3.3 gun deaths per 100,000. The other 5 in the top 5, Hawaii, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and New York.
Everything okay?
They all have these restrictions. All right, guess which state has the highest?
Illinois.
Mississippi, with 28.6.
I'm good.
I think of Hawaii is 3.3.
It's okay.
The top 5 states with the highest gun rates all have stand your ground laws, where you can, shoot first and ask questions later. The top 5 are Mississippi, Louisiana, Wyoming, Missouri, and Alabama. I was very surprised that Texas was not in that list. Mississippi, Wyoming, and Missouri also have permitless carry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's information about waiting periods. I don't want to go on a extensive research about it, but there's estimated. I found a study from the Harvard Business School actually that said waiting periods are estimated to reduce gun violence by 17%. Of course, the NRA has put out information that says waiting periods actually increase homicides. There are waiting periods in several states, Rhode Island, California, Hawaii, Illinois, Florida, Washington, and then Washington, D.C. Out of 300 million background checks since 1998, there have been 1.5 million denials. So that's not really infringing on people's Second Amendment. It's 1/3% of people are denied the ability to buy the gun. They just had a background check. We do agree. It's not all us and them. It should be us and us working together to solve this problem. I don't want anyone's gun. I don't want to take anyone's gun. I don't have any use for it. All I want is for my 2 children to go to school and for me not be afraid that my daughter is not going to come home when she goes. She's part of the marching band at Latrobe High. And I'm scared because there's big crowds. But we can work together on this. We all agree that You're not allowed to carry a machine gun. That's Pennsylvania law. You're not allowed to carry a sawed-off shotgun. You're not allowed to actually purchase a gun if you've had 3 DUIs in the past 5 years. If you're a patient at a mental hospital, you're not allowed to buy a gun.
Right.
We can find some common ground. But we have to work together. So, and I will not discourage anyone from thinking good thoughts or praying. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much to Dr. Marty. Our next speaker is actually my co-host. Courtney is a licensed social worker and trauma-informed therapist. She's been serving Westmoreland County and surrounding regions for over a decade now. As a mother of an elementary school child, Courtney knows firsthand the fear that many are experiencing right now, and also knows the importance of coming together to create change.
No, it's fine.
Thank you, Sarah. Not too long ago, I stood on a platform similar to this and did the Vigil for Ukraine. And once again, we are brought together in community in the wake of violence. This time, it hits a little bit closer to home. And truthfully, under circumstances that we rarely see elsewhere in the world. Once again, a man, a very young man, has mass murdered civilians. Making this even more sinister is the fact that the targets were among the most innocent and vulnerable among us. Little children at an elementary school. I can't help but picture those moments they spent huddled in fear. The images turn my stomach. And the worst part, this is not the first time this has happened. This is a pattern in America. It's an endless cycle of violence that shows no mercy for anyone. Perhaps the most terrifying part of the scenario for me is the children hearing the police and the first responders present and powerless to help them. According to eyewitnesses, for over an hour, precious moments to intervene slipped away as local law enforcement waited for reinforcement through Border Patrol to come and stop a boy who was mass murdering a school. Men and women in uniform who were supposed to help rescue them with no way to stop this domestic terrorist who destroyed their lives in just a matter of hours after an awards ceremony. My heart aches as I imagine the fear as they lay there waiting for help that wouldn't come in time. One of the teachers, Eva Morales, whose husband was a police officer, called him to say that she'd been shot and they needed help. Even with their loved ones inside of the classroom, 60 officers were powerless against one impulsive 18-year-old boy that had bought a gun legally. Many of these individuals would pass before they could get the medical care that they needed. And as I stare at their pictures and weep, I can't help but think, did their skin color have anything to do with the lack of response? Is this lack of response and excessive wait time a result of systemic racism and the lack of resources that occurs in these predominantly minority communities as a result? And why are we selling weapons to civilians that are local law enforcement officers, those who we have hired to protect us, are so limited to protect us against? Why can an 18-year-old walk into the store and then into an elementary school and destroy the lives of so many in such little time? How is this legal? Why does this keep happening? In many ways, freedom and safety are inversely related. As one goes up, the other goes down. But we can't have limitless freedom. That would be anarchy. That's not safe. To secure everyone's safety all of the time would mean no freedom, and that's not a reality that we want either. Neither extreme helps people. We must find the middle ground where our safety is guaranteed and freedom is also upheld. I don't know the solution, and I don't understand why this keeps happening. But I do know that we have to ask ourselves, what about our society teaches boys and men that they're allowed to act this way? And how do we limit access to these types of weapons in a way that ensures the safety of the general public? Being a mother in modern America means Googling bulletproof backpacks for your child. Because we have a government that unfortunately is too incompetent to stop these attacks from happening. We have to do better. We must find a way. And in the words of Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Our next speaker is Renee Ritz. Renee is going to be the new executive director of the Blackburn Center starting next month.
What time?
We are supposed to be keeping the time on there.
Good evening, everyone.
48.
Everybody can hear me good? Good, great. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Blackburn Center, I'm just going to briefly talk about it before I get into my speech. The mission of Blackburn Center is to advocate for the rights of all individuals to live free from domestic and sexual violence and other forms of violence by eliminating the root causes of this violence and providing for the well-being and safety for survivors and victims. Some of the services Blackburn Center provides includes a 24-hour hotline, shelter for victims of intimate partner violence, counseling and therapy, accompaniment to medical systems and legal proceedings, and educational programs. In the United States, 79% of homicides are gun-related compared to other countries. Gun violence is a prevalent issue in the United States as a whole and here in Westmoreland County. While we hear stories daily in the news about shootings in other states and cities, what many do not realize is that gun violence is closer to home than we think. Those statistics suggest every day across the United States there are more than 100 deaths and 200 injuries by firearms. Those statistics suggest that almost every one of us professionally knows someone who has been hurt or killed by a firearm. There is a strong connection between gun violence and domestic violence. About 2/3 of mass shootings can be linked to domestic violence. In fact, in many of these tragedies, the perpetrator first harms a family member or partner before going to commit a mass shooting. While these instances of gun violence receive the majority of media attention, they only account for a small portion of deaths where firearms are responsible. The majority of deaths caused by firearms are suicides, homicides, and other instances of domestic violence. Over half of all intimate partner homicides are committed with guns. About 4.5 million women in the United States have been threatened with a gun, and nearly 1 million women have been shot or shot at.
Back at the office.
Can you imagine? If an abusive partner has access to a gun, a woman is 5 times more likely to be killed. We know that similar to domestic violence, victims of trafficking are manipulated and controlled with the use of firearms. In 2020, the leading cause of death for teenagers in the United States became gun violence. This means that right now, a teenager is more likely to die from a gun than in a car accident. So far, in 2022, there have been at least 246 mass shootings in the United States, 27 of which were school shootings. According to a school study, nearly half of the perpetrators reported a history of rejection, which they often describe as bullying. Students who are bullied are more likely to have access to a loaded gun. A study done by the American Public Health Association found that 5% of children who are traditionally bullied, 9.2% of students who experience cyberbullying, and 15% of students who experience both traditional and cyberbullying reported access to a loaded gun. Prevention is key in reducing violence. Studies have shown that violence prevention programs have reduced gun violence. Blackburn Center provides an educational settings from preschool to college, encouraging students to develop attitudes and behaviors that behavior. Blackburn Center's educational programs in schools focus on prevention of bullying behaviors through empathy, as well as options for stopping bullying behaviors children have witnessed or experienced. Blackburn Center also offers video series for children 3 through 7. These series include a parent guide with stories whose messages can be shared with all ages. This series can be found at our website at blackburncenter.org. Resources for parents are also available at Blackburn Center's website, including information about bullying and tips for talking about bullying and harassment. Each of you is here tonight because you recognize there is a problem in our society. Gun violence is becoming more rapid, and every time tragedies like those our country has experienced in the last few weeks, it leaves us wondering, is there anything we can do? Most of the progress we see preventing firearm injury happens on the local level. Each of us has the capability to make a change here in our community. We can volunteer, we can provide funding to community programs. We can nurture children to grow into kind, empathetic adults. Most importantly, we can challenge the social norms that allow violence to have a place in our society. Working together, we can end violence. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Renee. So we have one speaker left, but before we get to that, I would just like to say a quick thank you to all of our speakers. A thank you to Voice of Westmoreland for partnering with March of Our Lives to host this event. Yeah, thank you. Voice of Westmoreland believes everyone deserves a dignified life safe from violence. We're a member-led grassroots group here in Westmoreland County, and we're asking you to please become a dues-paying member today. After our last speaker, we're going to end with a song as we prepare to walk with our candles to the bridge. Someone will light your candle when you pass through the gate. Our last speaker is Bishop Carl E. Jones. He served as a pastor of Greater Park Church in Greensburg since July 2003. He studied at Trinity Theological Seminary and is currently pursuing his Master of Divinity degree. Bishop Jones is a member and former branch president of the Greensburg NAACP. He's dedicated to his family, his church family, his relatives, his friends, and lives his life according to his favorite words. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Exactly. Amen. Amen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just want everybody to say with me, enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Say it one more time. Enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Say it one more time. Say
Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
You see, because if we don't start to see something and say something, we'll never do anything. And so I came out today to just talk with you about the senseless violence that we have. When you look at Sandy Hook, enough is enough. When you look at Parkland,
enough is enough.
when you look at Austin, Texas,
Enough is enough.
when you look at California,
Enough is enough.
when you look at Pittsburgh,
Enough is enough.
so we've got to start to say that enough is enough, and we've got to start to now not make this a rally, but make it a movement. Because when we make it a movement, then we start to put our money where our mouth is. And what we have to do is hold those accountable who are up there who are supposed to be representing us. Because when we hold our politicians accountable, then we will start to see change. But see, as long as we allow them and we turn our heads when they don't vote on the right bills, when they don't vote on the right legislation, then we find ourselves back at a movement like this saying enough is enough. So what we have to understand more than anything else is that the Bible says my people perish for lack of knowledge. So now that we have knowledge, what we need to understand is that we have to fight against violence. Well, how do we fight against violence? We do it by this, because it's not about Republicans. It's not about Democrats. It's not about black. It's not about white. It's not about Jews or Gentiles. It's about God's children learning how to love one another and get along with one another in the way God wanted us to in the first place.
Hallelujah.
What we have to recognize more than anything else is that if we're going to make it in this society, think about it. How many times does God have to give us catastrophes? Just think about the last hurricane or the last tornado or the last major thunderstorm. And if you'll notice, people don't look at color when there's trouble. People don't look at color when there's pain. When I think about those babies at Uvalde, when I think about the children at Sandy Hook, it didn't matter what color they were. It mattered that they were American. It mattered that they hurt. It mattered that they were children. And guess what? Just like it was their children, it could be ours.
Right.
Enough is enough.
So what we have to understand is as we move forward in this movement, we've got to start making our politicians and holding them accountable, because excuses are monuments that people build to themselves that seldom amount to anything. And if we don't start to hold them accountable, then who will?
Who will?
See, when we have a movement like this, we have to recognize that in that movement, we have to also be willing to motivate, and then not only motivate, but we have to be willing to get involved and make a difference. And the only way we're going to be able to make a difference is by making sure that we get involved and start to do things that are going to make sure that things happen in this community. Because just like it was Uvalde, it could be Greensburg, it could be next. It could be Southmoreland. It could be Jeanette. And how do we do that? Well, we do it by making sure that we hold them accountable to legislation that bans AR-15s.
When I hold this, that guy gets some
I heard
picture.
that they passed the legislation, but you know what? We need to ban that rifle. Because you know what? People are killing one another. And you know, it's time for it to stop.
Right.
It's time for it to stop.
Right.
It's time for love to reign supreme. I'm just asking you on this side to just say enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Okay, how about on this side? Just say enough is enough. Enough is enough. Because we got to recognize that love covers a multitude of sins.
Right.
So what we have to understand is we've got to get back to loving one another the way God said to love one another. Black men and white men coming together, black women and white women coming together. It doesn't matter what color your child is. It matters that they got blood running through their veins that came from our Father. Right. So all I'm asking you to do is get involved. Okay. Get involved. Make sure that this doesn't just become just another rally, but it becomes a movement where we start to affect change. And we affect change starting from the top. Because if they're not representing us, they're only representing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Woo!
So I'm asking you, please, 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 get involved. Okay. Get involved. Get involved. And say enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good message. All right, can we get a big round of applause for all of our speakers and for Voice of Westmoreland?
Woo!
All right, so we're going to start the procession start of the night. If everybody can take your candles and get into a single file procession over by the gate so that we can walk over to the bridge. Single file is very important. We don't have many lighters. So we can start going over and doing that now. Thank you.